We'll go ahead and get started then. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Coeur Housing Virtual Community Meeting, January 27th, 2021. Let's kind of go over what we're going to cover tonight. We're going to first start off with a staff presentation. Then there's an opportunity for live polling questions, input and recommendations by neighborhood groups and community members. And then there'll be a Coeur Housing community discussion. So after that, then we'll close. So the purpose of this meeting is to gather input, feedback, and recommendations in regards to neighborhood compatibility so that those concerns can be addressed during the development of the code. Start off with our first polling question. Who do you represent? Are you a community member, public at large? Are you part of a neighborhood group, historic preservationist, community organization, developer builder, realtor, council member, or commissioner member? So please check one so that the host, or check. I wasn't able to click mine, so I don't know if anybody was having problems with that.
We're getting responses coming in. We have 86% have voted, so we're good. Okay,
Thanks.
I'm not able to vote, Mike.
Okay, the panelists probably can't vote. Okay, I'm going to end the polling and share the results.
Okay.
Okay.
So we have a majority of community members, some neighborhood groups, developers, realtors, council members. All right, we'll go ahead and move on. Where have we been? How did we get to where we're at and where have we been? So we're kind of go over where we've been. The city of Coeur d'Alene has been doing infill housing since 1980s. The first code was adopted in 1988 to 2007, and that was cluster housing. That was then repealed, and a new pocket housing was adopted in 2007, and that went to 2017. So you can see the city of Coeur d'Alene has been involved in infill housing since the 80s, and they've had an infill housing code on the books for a long time. So now they're in the process of adopting and looking at a new code, and the new code proposed name is Coeur Housing, and it'll have an estimated code viability of 15 years. So to kick this off, we held a Missing Middle Forum at North Idaho College in 2019, kind of to give us some ideas about infill housing and what is possible. So from takeaways from that forum, first one was, there is a need for infill missing middle housing in the city. Not all neighborhoods should be designated for infill development. And ensure that established neighborhoods won't be negatively impacted. Design of units is very important, want good quality of design. Density should decrease as you move away from the downtown core. Allow for a variety of housing types and various densities and styles within residential neighborhoods. The units should be house scale and if they're located in a residential neighborhood. So missing middle housing is the basis of Coeur housing. As you can see, missing middle is not single family, it's not the downtown, it's not large apartment complexes, it's house scale, triplexes, fourplex, courtyard apartments, bungalows, stuff that's been built since the 30s and 40s, but just hasn't been lately. So a Coeur Housing Committee was formed, and that was formed right after that infill housing forum, the Missing Middle Forum, and we have a wide variety of members. Our newest members are Walter Burns and Joe Morris, their neighborhood representatives. We have Kevin Jester, Shauna Clark, Josh Scher, Jeff Lemon, Dennis Cunningham, James Casper, Chad Oakland, Greta Snodgrass, Rob Orth, Thomas Cena, Woody McEvers, Nick Grainer, and Nicole Kaler. So we got a wide variety of people on this Coeur Housing Committee that's giving guidance and input on the new proposed code. So where have we been? So we had our first workshop in February of 2020, and we had continued to have them through the fall. And then we held our first public meeting in November of 2020, and now this current meeting we're holding today. So what is the current status of Coeur Housing? So right now we're in the information gathering stage. We're obtaining community input and recommendations. So the code will then be developed after the public input. Well, there'll be another committee workshops, and there'll also be public meetings with the Planning Commission and City Council. So what is core housing? First, we have to start with the mission statement. What are we trying to accomplish here? The mission statement is to create a new infill housing code that will allow additional housing units that are quality and design in areas of the city that are appropriate. So what is infill housing and core housing? Infill housing is defined as new housing units constructed on vacant or underutilized lots, generally in existing neighborhoods. It allows for additional housing product types on existing lots, utilizes existing infrastructure, and allows property owners more housing choices. So is this core housing? Answer is no. This is not large multiplexes, big, huge developments. This is one lot, one product. Right now, this is products that can be, you can do these large apartment complexes now in the city by right in the R17 and C17 zoning districts. This is not what core housing is trying to address, is trying to add more large apartment complexes, because that's what can already be done now. That's going to be done by right. So is this code proposed or driven by realtor developers? We're going to try to go over some myths that's been out there. So no, this is not an infill code that has been a priority. This has been a priority of city council to replace previous infill codes, such as the pocket housing code and the cluster housing code. It's to respond to housing needs. The planning department is leading the effort with the help of an advisory committee and input from community and neighborhood groups. Another myth is this a pro-growth agenda or similar to other states and cities that are eliminating single-family neighborhoods and zoning? Answer is no. Core housing is being designed to allow more housing choices other than single-family detached and mid-rise apartment complexes. As the city continues to grow, more choices are necessary to provide for sale and for rent housing options for community members, including our workforce, families, young professionals, and retirees. Will core housing result in zone changes in my neighborhood? No, it will not result in changes to the underlying zoning. This has been a myth out there that the city's changing everyone is underlining zoning. That is not the case. Will every residential lot or corner lot be eligible for core housing? The answer is no. The committee is exploring the appropriate minimum lot size and maximum project size. We are asking the community for input on the size. So one of the questions today is, what is the appropriate minimum lot size to qualify for core housing? We'd like to get feedback from the neighborhoods and the citizens. So is core housing the same as R34 special use permit? That answer is no. Core housing would be a house scale housing projects on individual lots. R34 requires a special use permit that requires a public hearing and is intended for large apartment projects that are medium to high density residential projects, allowing up to 63 feet in height. So this is not the intent of core housing to do these, continue to do these apartment complexes that are currently allowed. Is the code already drafted? No. Staff is working with the committee, and the group is in the process of gathering information. So we're in the information gathering stage. I'd like to get feedback from the citizens. So what are the housing types that are being proposed for core housing? So let's kind of go over that. So right now we have triplexes are being proposed, courtyard apartments, garden cluster, row housing, multiplex, and live works. As you can tell, these are all scalable to a house size scale. You know, it's not going to be single family. It's not the downtown. It's not large apartment complexes. It's everything in the middle. Core housing types. We just went over those, the triplexes all the way down to the multiplex, smalls and mediums. Kind of go over those again visually, kind of see what those conceptually look like. Here's a triplex and a fourplex on your left, and on the right is a live work unit. The cottage court product will have a grassy area to the center and houses that surround it with maybe a couple more units tied to in the rear. The courtyard building is a product, people call it like the Melrose Place type of apartment building. We have a patio area in the center and apartments that are attached to it. And then the tiny house court is a product similar to the cottage court, but with tiny houses. Townhomes, and then the multiplex small would be like 6 to 10 units, and the multiplex medium 11 to 16 units. And these wouldn't be allowed only in certain areas in the city, not anywhere in the city, because core housing has limited areas that we're going to show you where certain products are allowed and certain products are not allowed. So here's some more visualization of a cottage core. Here's some photos of what it looks like around the area. So you can see there's a grassy area in the middle, houses facing the grass area, cute bungalows, fourplexes, house scale, kind of fit in with the neighborhood. It's one product, one lot. Here's another fourplex. Here are some triplexes. There's a triplex on a corner. You can see the two entrances on this side, one entrance on this side. It fits in with the single family neighborhood, but there's 3 units in it. You wouldn't be able to tell from the street. Here's a live work unit. Work on the bottom, live up top. This is going to be more common in the new economy where people are living and working in the same place. Multiplex products. There's some multiplex mediums showing that they're residential in scale. They're not 5 stories with apartment complex. They're one lot, one product. There's townhomes. So will all the core housing types be allowed in all areas of the city? The answer to that is no. Not all core housing types are allowed in all areas of the city. It will depend on the zoning, the distance from the downtown, and the walkability of the property are all factors when deciding what housing types are most appropriate for that area. So core housing areas are a product of walkability and the relation to the downtown cores. You add those two together and you come up with the core housing areas. So this is a core housing map illustrating the different core housing areas. So certain products allowed here would not be allowed the same over here or here. And those have not been vetted through. We're still having discussion and input on what product types should be best located in each one of these areas. So yeah, have they been determined for each area? No, we're still in the process of that. The core housing types have not been determined and we're waiting on feedback and we're going to vet that through. What is neighborhood compatibility? Simply put, neighborhood compatibility is achieved when a new home or addition to an existing home is designed in a manner that blends in with the following characteristics of the immediate neighborhood: scale of the surrounding residence, architectural styles and building materials, front, side, and rear setbacks. So the height, design, and orientation makes it all compatible. So there are already examples of existing core housing in our older neighborhoods. There's large single-family homes that have been converted into multiple units. Some older mixed-use buildings have also been converted into apartments. Got a couple images of those. Here's a 4-unit house. Looks like a house, but there's 4 units in it. Here's the one next to Epiphany Park. There's 8 units in this one. Here's you can see the 3 mailboxes on this one. This is a 3-unit. It's a bungalow style with 3 units in it. Here's another one with 7 units. All looks like single family, but they have 7 units in it. Different amount of units within a single family neighborhood. And it's on one lot, one product. So some of the older neighborhoods in the downtown area have historic designations or are in the process of becoming a historic district. The city's historic preservation plan is just beginning, and the historic buildings, districts, and neighborhoods will be evaluated, as well as the zoning code, to see how zoning may impact historic properties. Core housing planning considerations to be considered are, should there be restrictions on the types of infill housing that are appropriate in neighborhoods with historic designations and districts? Or, and should historic neighborhoods be exempt from core housing? And what is the appropriate minimum lot size? So we're going to be asking these questions at the end of this presentation to get feedback from everybody that's attending this meeting. So be prepared to raise your hand at the end of this when it's time for public input, and you'll be able to speak to your concerns and what you think on these issues. So neighborhood compatibility. For this slide, you can see there's 2 older existing houses, a newer house in the middle. They incorporate some of the older styles to make it more compatible. Here's an image that's saying it doesn't take anything into consideration and it just wants to do what it wants to do. Not compatible. So will core housing take design elements into consideration? Right now, there are design elements under consideration, and we're looking at a wide variety of those, such as the list that's in front of you: mix of materials, roof pitch modulation, scale, landscaping, lighting, street frontage, facade, and garage doors. I'll go through a couple slides here to show you but before we do that, I'll kind of show you why the old pocket housing was repealed. This is some of the products that were approved through the pocket housing ordinance. Here's another, just the front garages, no front doors, garages fronting the streets. So the design and the quality wasn't as good, and that's the reason that was repealed. So these are the design elements that are currently under consideration. The mix of materials, have a variety of mix of materials on the buildings. Should that be good? Considering roof pitch modulation, should there be a variety of roof pitch modulations on each of the products? We want to make sure it's scale. It's not overpowering. It's compatible with the adjoining areas in the residential environment. We're going to consider landscaping as part of the code. We're going to consider street frontage facade. Make sure that as you're going across the front of the street, the facade is addressed. Rooftop equipment screening. We want to make sure there's no rooftop equipment that's overpowering and not properly screened. Another design element under consideration is the variation. So we don't want cookie cutter type developments. We want a variety of housing styles and types with materials adjacent to each other. With visible ground level for a front porch, with the front entry visible, not wrapped around the side of the building with a blank wall facing the street. So we'll go into some polling questions. You guys can go ahead and poll through these next questions. I'll read them. There's 2 through 8. And as you click through them, the first polling question is, what core housing types would be most compatible within a historic/established neighborhood? Check all that apply. Do you feel like a 3-plex, 4-plex cottage court apply? Maybe multiplex smalls, live works. Feel free to check all that you feel are necessary. The next question, would you support core housing in your neighborhood if it were house scale? Yes, no, or unsure. Next polling question, what do you think would be the appropriate number of units for a core housing project in a historic established area? 3, 4, 8, unsure. Next question, do you agree that the design and the quality of housing are important aspects that should be incorporated into the core housing code? Yes, no, or unsure. Should design elements be left up to the property owner and/or architect in historic established neighborhoods? Yes, no, or unsure. Next question, should the core housing code apply differently to historic neighborhoods? Check all that apply. Core housing should be excluded from neighborhoods with historic designations, or there should be restrictions on the type of core housing that are allowed in historic neighborhoods, or unsure. And finally, what is the appropriate minimum lot size to qualify for a core housing project? 1.5 city lots, 1 3/4 city lots, 2 city lots, 2 1/4 city lots. We did not want to have every city. A typical city lot is 50 by 110, which is 5,500 square feet. And we didn't feel that every single lot should have a core housing product on it. It should be a certain amount to kick you in to qualify for that core housing product. So not every single lot in the city will be developed with core housing. And that concludes the polling questions. Don't know. Okay, so we're going to go to public input and recommendations. But Hillary, did you want to reveal the public comment?
Yes, I will. I think some
Okay.
people were having issues maybe with their web browsers, so apologize if you weren't able to do it. We have about 60% have voted, so
Okay.
we'll end that and share the results. And you should be able to just scroll down on your screen and see the results for each of those questions.
Okay. Can you see this on my screen?
No, it should be on, each person has it on their own screen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
I don't know if you want to share any of the
yeah, the
results.
first question,
No?
what core housing types would be most compatible within a historic established neighborhood? 52% said threeplex, triplexes, 48% said fourplexes, 52% said townhomes. The multiplex mediums was only 5% and multiplex small 10%. So you see those were not be compatible. The next question, would you support core housing in your neighborhood if it were house scale? 62% said yes, 24% no, and 14 was unsure. Next question, what do you think would be appropriate number of units for a core housing project in a historic established area? 33% and said 3 and 33% said 4 units. There was none for 5, 5% for 6, 0 for 7, 0 for 9, and 5% for 8. 24% were unsure. Do you agree that the design and quality of housing are important aspects that should be incorporated into the core housing code? 95% said yes. The next one, should design elements be left to the property owner and or architect in historic established neighborhoods? 14% said yes, 71% said no. Okay, good input. Should the core housing code apply differently to historic neighborhoods? Check all that apply. 29% said core housing should be excluded from neighborhoods within historic designations. 71% there should be restrictions on the types of core houses that are allowed in those historic neighborhoods. And number 7, what is the appropriate minimum lot size to qualify for a core housing project? This was pretty, 29% was the 1.5, 24% for 1.75, 29% for 11,000, and 19% for 12,500. So great feedback, appreciate all that. Now we're going to go to the live comments and the live public input and recommendations. So we're going to start out by the first one, which is, what concerns you most about core housing? And Chaz is our IT guy. He's going to be, if you raise your hand, he will get a hold of you and get you into the meeting, so you'll be able to present your concerns. Please bear with us while Chaz, our IT guy's working on that. Chaz, were you able to get anybody?
We have one hand so far, so
Okay.
looks like Ed.
Chaz, did you want to give Ed the floor to start us out?
Yep, he's unmuted.
Okay, Ed, go ahead and.
Can everybody hear me? I'll assume that that's a yes because I can't hear anybody else. So I live in the Garden District, and my concern is, I mean, there's a couple of concerns. First of all, is despite the promises that it won't affect the neighborhood, everything will be built to look, to fit into the neighborhood and all that. That's great conceptually, but who knows what's going to happen in the next 15 years. One of the examples you gave was of a 7-unit, I don't know if it was a fourplex or a triplex, whichever one you said. So 7 units, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 of those on one block, which if you go by 8250 square feet, most blocks would have multiple lots that would qualify. That's 15, 20, 25 apartments per block, which means 15, 20, 25, 30, maybe even more cars. I'm not sure where all these people are going to park their car. I'm assuming there won't be any garages for these. And it's just going to make it busier, parking issues. more dense, and that's not what these old residential neighborhoods are about. I don't think most people that live here, you know, bought a house here, want to live surrounded by apartments. I mean, I know I've spoken to a bunch of people about this, and nobody said, yeah, this is a great idea. It's going to fundamentally transform these neighborhoods from something that the residents who live here like, appreciate, moved here for a reason, into something that, you know, is more Seattle or LA or San Francisco. And I don't think people move to the Garden District to live in San Francisco or Seattle or LA. And that is my concern that I want to share.
Thanks, Ed.
And I'll go back on mute now.
Appreciate that. Chaz, is there anybody next?
Looks like Woody would like to talk.
Okay.
Woody, we can't hear you. Are you muted still?
Yeah, it still shows it muted.
Okay, try and go get him unmuted. It looks like another hand was just raised. Why don't we move on to one of them while we work on Woody's? How about Haley? Okay. Okay, we can hear you now, I think.
Okay. So I too live downtown, and I have lived in North Idaho my entire life. I'm still relatively young, and I share the same concerns that were just mentioned. The infrastructure, walking downtown already, there's already new homes that are being built, and I have to wonder, where are these people going to actually be able to spread out? We're going to have the cars, we're going to have the influx of people itself. Just focusing on that, with people comes other concerns of mainly crime. I work in law enforcement, and that is one of my biggest concerns downtown. The more people you have, it's going to attract people, whether we want it or not, that are up to no good. So I share the same concern about our infrastructure and how it'll affect the downtown historic part of town that is bringing most of our people to North Idaho. And that's it.
Thanks, Haley.
Okay, let's looks like Chris Grubb. All right, Chris, you're unmuted.
Hey, okay. I frankly like the idea of mixing in some, a variety of demographic, obviously to not a demographic that might be commit crime and so forth, obviously, but is there a consideration for limiting the number of long and short-term rentals? Because I could certainly see that be an obvious boom as a result of this. So I was wondering if that was going to be part of the consideration.
Well, currently, we have a short-term rental ordinance online, and right now, to have multiple, you have to have owner occupied. You can do one on one property. That's all you can do. One unit, one. So you can only do one of the. If you had a 7-unit apartment building, only one could be short-term rental. That's under the current short-term rental ordinance. So just wanted to let you know that, Chris.
Would there be any changes to that, or different considerations? Obviously, if you're going to have a block with, a dozen or so apartments in it, obviously most of those in apartment nature would be rentals, but so we're not talking about those structures, but some of the other types of townhouses and so forth, would that make a change, since obviously the density in a given area that has one of these types of properties would be higher.
Right now, it's not a consideration, but we can put down your concern and bring it up to the committee and see if they'd like to address it. So I appreciate you bringing this forward as an item that we need to look at.
Okay, did we get Woody's audio figured out?
I don't know. Chaz, have you looked at that?
Wait, Woody, try now.
Am I there?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Great. Thanks for working with me. I'll someday learn all this. You know, those folks that just talked brought up some interesting points. The fellow from Dalton, the first thing that came to mind to me was if you get into a neighborhood and there's like a single old lot, which was basically the infill ideas, here's this lot, let's put something different on it. Well, if people kept buying the lots and scraping the houses, could it ever be developed into like what he was picturing, this lot after lot after lot that's been changed over time to accommodate for this core housing? You follow that kind of line of thinking? It's sort of the extreme, but I never even thought about that. I can't picture this being neighborhoods of this, but in theory, could it be?
Well, we're in the process of discussing the minimum lot size. So that's going to kind of drive what that looks like. So if it's a really low number, then yes, it's highly likely that there could be a lot of units going on in a block. But if it's a little bit larger, a little bit harder to obtain, like 2 full lots or 1 3/4 or close to 2, then it's not going to be every lot, because most lots in the city are 5,500 square feet. So you would have to buy almost 3 lots to get one done, and that's not going to put it on every single, the whole block is not going to be one unless someone buys the whole block.
So along that same line, this core housing is not considered to be low income affordable housing. Is that correct?
That's correct. This is going to be private sector, whatever the private market is going to bear is what the rents are going to be and what the housing sales are going to be selling these products at. So it's not a subsidized government ordinance that we're going to get in there and subsidize these units. So it would have to be built brand new construction. That's expensive. The lot's expensive. I don't think this is going to be what most people consider as affordable housing.
Okay. And then the other one question I had was on the compatibility perspective of property rights. You know, this is Idaho. We think that's important. I find it difficult sometimes to tell people what they have to do rather than what they can do. Do you follow? And I'm wondering if am I just seeing it a little differently, you think?
No, that's a good question. We are in the process of looking at what requirements should be established on each one of these products, and what is it too onerous, or is it just right, or is it not enough? So we're still having those conversations on what is the appropriate amount of design elements that need to be incorporated into a product, or is it too much? So we're already having those conversations, and that hasn't completely been vetted through. So that is a good point, Woody.
My last thought was those pictures you showed of the earlier pocket housing, we called it, I think, or something, that
Yes.
I got the vibe that somebody didn't like it, but yet I looked at it and it looked very, I mean, people can live there. They might not have a front door next to their garage or whatever. I guess that's kind of where I get into wondering, how much do I have to do, and what do I want to do? Do you follow? I don't see those things, those original projects, as bad.
Yes, I
There's
do
people
follow. It is
living
very,
there. They're making the best of it. And you with me on that?
yeah. I am with you on that. I definitely agree with you on that. And that is still a discussion item that we're having with this core housing code. What does it look like? How do we want it to be when a final product is out there look like? Or do we not care if they're just garage doors and vinyl siding and just throw them up anywhere? I mean, that's a good question.
Well, that just came from thinking about our history here. If you drive around the old neighborhoods, there's a lot of cool old places, but when those were being developed and some of the old neighbors, there's not anything that matches. It was kind of like, who are the builders? You can see that they built this and they built that, but there's a lot of just plain Jane that becomes somebody's home, becomes somebody's history. And I think that's part of our culture, and part of what's I like about Coeur d'Alene is it's not all the same. It doesn't look like Seattle and LA and stuff, all the new building. A lot of these stuff's old, and I understand it's being torn down and replaced, but then that person gets to choose what they want it to look like or what they want it to feel like. And it feels like we're sort of judging them on what color they painted it or what their siding was. And that, again, I'm still trying to wrap my head around some of this,
Yes, and that's still on the table, this design
Okay.
part of it. So that is still on the table. It's not been completely established, and there is a big property rights part of this that we need to take into consideration. And I appreciate you bringing that up, Woody.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, it looks like Kara.
Hi, Kara.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I live in the Mullen Historical District. Was raised here in this house my whole life, moved away, came back, rented from my parents. And I have a giant apartment complex that was allowed to be built by the city. And I think what a lot of these neighborhoods are concerned with are the concerns that all of our neighbors have here is scale wasn't considered, density wasn't considered. And I know the historical district fought really hard to make that project a lot smaller than it was initially proposed to be. And it's still big, it's huge. It doesn't fit with the neighborhood. I get that it's close to downtown and it's walkable, but this is a little street. There's a ton of cars because people who don't want to pay for parking downtown park here. And it's just changed the neighborhood a lot. And I think for these other districts, they're concerned about that and they want it to still feel like a neighborhood and not like they're surrounded by 100 extra people. And I know it's impacted the houses on Mullen because the apartments aren't utilizing their parking, their off-street parking, because it's not easy access from their houses, which I get, but it just kind of affects everybody and affects the feel. So I think it's a great concept, but I think I'm very concerned that it's not going to be in the neighborhood's best interests, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And Kara, I think you're speaking of the Lake Apartments. So that would be
Yes.
bigger than would be allowed.
Yeah, and
for
it's
housing.
really big, and I get to look at a parking lot behind my house every day. It's not great. And I love this house and I love this neighborhood, but I don't really like what's going on behind me.
Yeah. And you understand that Hillary said that's not core housing.
Yeah, but
Okay.
that was still allowed, and I would hope that core housing would keep something like that from happening again,
Okay. Good.
because it shouldn't have happened.
Okay. So not like that. Okay.
And that's all.
Thanks, Kara.
Thank you. Looks like Drew has a question. Drew Dittman. All right. Drew, I think you can speak now.
Hello, Hillary and Mike. How are you guys?
Fine.
So for my edification, I guess, and I think it might help alleviate some of the concerns and questions that I've heard tonight. Can one of you guys maybe explain how the core housing standards themselves relate to the underlying zone, in particular underlying density, and also how it relates to development and design standards such as, parking and stuff like that, how all that kind of all ties together?
Yeah, right now we haven't vetted through all where each product type would be allowed. So your zoning is going to be under consideration. So if you have an R12 zone and you're far out, you're not going to be allowed to do a multiplex large. You're not going to be, you don't qualify for these other work units. It's like certain areas will be vetted through for what would be best for that zoning and that core housing area and what product types would be allowed. So you wouldn't, so that's going to be the main driving force of what is going to be allowed in which area of the city. So it's not going to be anywhere in the city you'll be allowed to do all these products, just certain areas.
So
And then the
then, Michael,
design element, yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so then does that relate to density too? So if you're in R12, are we still limited to 12 units per acre then?
No, it's going to be looked at differently. It's going to be looked on as if you're in the R12, it's going to be looked on the product type and the lot size, what you can do. But if you're in the R8, the product type will be different than what it is in the R8.
Sure, but you're not held to that underlying density then.
No.
Okay. What about, development and design standards, parking and stuff like that? I'm assuming all of that will still apply.
We've already vetted through the parking requirements, and I don't know if you're a part of that. On our website, we have all the listing of the parkings, and each area will have a parking ratio. So that has been vetted through, and I can send you a link tomorrow, Drew, if you would like.
Please,
Okay.
please. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Drew.
Okay, we have Faye Sweeney.
Hi, Faye.
Okay, Faye, I think you can speak now. Oh, try again. Jazz, maybe you can help with Faye's. It's not unmuting her.
Faye, we're having trouble
She's muted.
hearing you. You're muted, so we're trying to fix that. So if you could bear with us, we'll get you set up.
And I think it might be on her end.
Faye, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, it's.
Oh,
Oh, we had it for a second.
we had it for 1 second. I saw it went away.
I
Faye, we
know,
almost had it.
almost.
Okay,
Okay.
there you go.
Faye.
Okay, sorry. I uploaded, well, never mind. I had two concerns. Like Woody, I'm concerned about this. Every a block could have endless units, infill units on it. And my fears were not allayed by the answer that you gave. So are you saying that there is no way to limit the density of a block?
Well, the minimum lot size will require that. So if right now it's 5,500 square feet is a typical lot, and if no one has the lot, there's going to be none on that. There'll be none on the block unless someone buys 2 or 3 lots.
But you could have an entire block bought up by someone and
Yeah,
you
but-
could have these units exclusively with no single family residence on the block.
That is a concern, but we're also looking at the max lot size. Right now, it's at 33,000 square feet, which is 1 block. So we could still look at that to lower that number if we need to. That has not been, this is still an item we're getting public input, and this is good input that we're getting, that this is a concern about the whole block being developed as 1 core housing. So we'll put that note down.
Thank you. My other concern, I was a little, when I attended the previous Zoom discussion like this, parking was something that really concerned people. And we were told that the parking requirements are less strenuous the closer you get to downtown. And I had hoped to see more discussion of that tonight, but am I hearing you say you've already made your decisions about parking, and so that's
Well,
not open
it's-
for discussion?
It is open for discussion. This whole meeting is about public input and getting ideas and concerns addressed. The Core Housing Committee has reviewed it, but not the public input part of it yet. So it's
Okay.
still nothing, the code has not been written. It's just been suggested as that so far, but it has not been, that's not officially what the parking requirement is.
But you didn't bring it up for discussion tonight, right?
The final slide kind of said, what are your overall concerns? You could bring up anything you want. And so parking can be brought up. So we're not saying you can't talk about parking. Parking talked about. We
As
can
I,
put
rem-
it-
as I
we can-
remember before, you said in the downtown, and I can't remember the term that was used, but in close to downtown, that you
Mhm.
were assuming 1.5 cars per unit. And I've not talked to anyone that thinks today that that's realistic, even though we're in a walking area.
Okay, that's a good concern. I'll put that down, parking. And we can look at that again.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Faye.
All right, Mark.
Hi, Mark.
We're trying to unmute him.
Okay.
Okay, Mark.
Me now?
Muted. Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. My property's is closer to the hospital, just off of Government Way. And a couple questions. How does the Core Housing view existing buildings that you may want to turn into a triplex? I don't want to tear down what's already there. I simply want to add a unit because I already have two. And by the way, there's a newly approved apartment building going in right next to me.
Mhm.
So that's my question.
Well, the first question was, well, what's your lot size? That would be to see if you qualify for core housing. If you got a typical lot, then you couldn't do it. The second thing is it's for infill, underutilized lots. They're going to be torn down and redeveloped. So it'd be a redevelopment property, not fixing it, just adding another unit to an older house.
Well, they're separate houses already.
Mhm.
So basically I want to fill in a garage and make 3 units, and I've got parking. So since there's already an apartment building going in next door and multi-units all around me, I'm wondering why this would not allow me to do this.
We'd have to check what your zoning is first. Are you already multifamily? What is your zone? What is the lot size? All that would be taken in consideration, and where you're at and what product types are allowed in that area. So right now, none of that has been vetted through. We're still in the information gathering side, but I could look into that part as far as retrofitting an old house and turning it, and adding a unit, adding more units.
And Mark, we did have some internal conversations with other city departments on that, and the concern with some of the older homes that kind of fit in that core housing is just trying to do it with our current building code as well. So that's something that is of interest, but is probably not going to be specifically addressed with core housing.
That's
But
right.
As Mike said, I mean, you may currently have a zoning district that allows you to add an additional unit if you could meet all of the codes.
No, it doesn't. That's why I'm here trying to see if you can help me out. Again, I got an
Okay.
apartment building going in next door, and I'm not asking for anything more than I've got other than turning the garage into another apartment, and I've got parking as well.
Okay, well, we'll share that with the committee.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Okay, Lynn.
Can you hear?
Oh,
Oh,
we did. Let's see. Let's try and get her unmuted again.
Hello?
Okay. Yes.
Oh, good. I live on the East Mullen Historic
neighborhood area. And after going over recommendations from your committee, I have a sheet of recommendations. I have some concerns. One, it stated the building height for R12 could go up to 39 feet and the R17 could go up to 56 feet. I'm new to this. I just started looking today on everything, but it just seems like that does not fit into a neighborhood. It is not compatible with existing established neighborhoods. So I was wondering about that. Do you have any?
You had a little feedback there, Lynn, but I think I got your question about building height. Well, building height in the residential areas will be compatible with the single family. Those areas were areas like around Midtown, areas that are walkable, have a different zoning district that are like a multifamily R17 zoning district. Those would be considered for those heights, not for neighborhoods in residential areas.
Okay,
So that's hopefully that answers your question.
it
And
does. It was a little shocking when I read it.
Thanks, Lynn.
Okay,
I
that's
have
all.
a
Oh, sorry.
question about parking also, big concern. You know what's happening, I think?
I think,
It's because Joe's in the other, he's about 10 feet from me and it's bouncing off of each other.
okay,
I'm sorry.
that's all right.
Okay. Parking in the area that was the downtown area, it seemed like it was one unit or one parking space.
That's right. I think that's
And
right.
that is not adequate. If you drive along Mullen, the apartments on Lake Apartments and also down by 15th and Mullen, cars are lined along the streets. And some of these streets in downtown are pretty narrow. And I just think that that might ruin a neighborhood. So I have a concern about parking.
Okay, thanks.
And then also setbacks. I didn't read anything really specific about setbacks. Seemed like there was some leeway in there, but setbacks, side, front, back are very important for established neighborhoods.
Thank you. Yes.
Because we fought this for some infills a few years ago, and they were trying to get it building on the property lines very close. So I'm concerned about setbacks.
All right, thanks, Lynn.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mike, that's all we have on this question. You want to go to the next public input?
Yes, we'll move on to the next question for public input. What other important design concerns that were not brought up today that you feel are important and would like to see addressed in the proposed code? So if you have any other ideas that you think are important that staff should and the committee should look at, we'd appreciate that. And anybody that already spoke can speak again if they would like about this question specifically. Do we have anybody?
We do. We have Kiki and Ed. So let's get Kiki.
All right. Hi, Kiki.
Trying to unmute her still.
Okay.
I unmuted myself, but the host
Okay.
muted me again.
Okay.
I think this is a reflex timing issue. You guys got to slow down a little bit.
Okay.
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, good.
So my only thing about the design concerns are who determines the final design decision and what is the appeal process to that? And once the criteria is set, how often does that change? Can you just address that?
Right. Right now, the design elements have not been vetted through each housing type. We're still in the discussion part of that design elements. I think it was going to be a staff review, so it would not go through a design review committee. They were wanting it to be, the recommendation so far was to have the design approved at a staff level and not bringing it through a design commission. So the design guidelines would kind of be bulleted enough so the architect and the staff can look at it and make a determination that that would be what if it was adequate or not. And I think the appeal process, correct me if I'm wrong, Hillary, that they'd have to appeal to the director of the planning department in order to appeal any discrepancies. And I can have Hillary kind of, if that was true or not. That's what my understanding was. Is that what you were?
So, yes, it'd be administrative review. And we talked about it might be helpful if there was some kind of checklist that could be submitted with the building permit to show how they've met each of the required elements.
Right.
And then if they decided they didn't agree with staff's review of it, they could appeal it and follow the administrative appeal process that would believe, I'm not sure if that goes straight to council. I think it does.
Okay. Do you have any more?
Nope, that was all I had. Thank you.
Thanks, Kiki.
I'm used to just asking the questions and moving on. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Ed has his hand up.
Okay, so my question is, will there be any, and I realize the lot size hasn't been determined, but whatever it is, will there be any consideration for what can be built on a specific lot size? Because it seems like it's a static number of, we're going to have these, this minimum and this maximum and these types of buildings that can be built. But is there going to be consideration to say, if it's between 8250 and 10,000 square feet, you can only build these types of units. If it's between 10,000 and 12,500, just as an example, you can build these types of units? Or is it just going to be, you can build whatever you want on any lot that is above the minimum threshold?
Good question, Ed. That boils down to each product type is going to have its own minimum lot requirements. And so they couldn't do any product they want. They would have to meet the setbacks for each one of those individual requirements. So like the cottage court is going to have a different size requirement than it would be for the triplex. Triplex might have a smaller lot available, but you couldn't do the cottage court because it wouldn't fit on there. So each one is going to have its own minimum lot and maximum lot size requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have Chris Grubb.
Hi, Chris.
Chris, do you have the ability to unmute yourself?
You got me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was waiting for you guys to do it like last time. Is there been consideration for scalable impact fees depending on the size of the particular project that might go in to help deal with infrastructure issues?
I'm unaware of that at this time. Hillary, do you know if there's any scalable impact fees?
No, it would just be based on what the unit type is. So
yeah,
we haven't talked about that. We will be updating the impact fees though after the comprehensive plan update is done. So it's possible that might be able to look at different housing product types and have different fees associated with that.
Would it be based on the type or number of units, I guess, or both?
It's usually the number of units, but it's also type. So kind of looking at, when you look at apartments versus single family, there's a different way to look at that. Same with duplex. So it's usually a combination of the type and the number of units for calculating the impact fees.
But that's something that's already in place, I guess, that'll just continue with this type of project?
That's correct. Yeah. There would be no exemptions from impact fees.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, I don't see other hands. I know Lisa had indicated an interest in speaking previously. I don't know, Lisa, if this is one of the questions you wanted to weigh in on. I will give you the ability to speak.
Hello?
Yes,
Hi.
we can hear you.
Oh, good, good. Well, I'm having serious problems, so I'm over here at Walters, but all right. I am Lisa Benschike, the president of the Garden District Board of Directors. And we have some problems. We are concerned about all of this talking, and we would like to ask you and beg you to exempt us from this plan, the Garden District, Downtown Garden District.
Okay. I got
We,
that.
we have very, very little open space. And so coming in and making these infill housing is almost ridiculous. I mean, there's just not room. And we are in the process with the state of Idaho to become a designated historic district. And we're waiting for the state to come back to us and work it out. So, you know, there's lots of things here that are very, very special. And without the land, unless we're going to, you know, knock down 4 buildings, there really isn't any opportunity. So it would be wonderful if the committee could exempt Downtown Garden District.
All right, I appreciate your comments. I'll bring that up with the director and the committee.
And thank you. And the board of directors down here and the community is the people that are paying attention are very concerned about this because it's working. What we're doing is working.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks, Mike.
I don't see any other hands raised on this one. I don't know if you want to go to the next one, Mike.
Yeah,
And
this is our final slide for public input, which is any other thoughts or ideas you would like to bring up at this time in regards to neighborhood compatibility. So if anybody would like to give some final thoughts, that would be fine.
okay, looks like Susie Snedeker.
Hi, Susie.
Okay. She'll be rejoining in just a moment. She had a different version of Zoom.
Okay.
Susie, have you joined us? There she is. Okay. Susie, are you able to speak? You might be muted. Susie?
It doesn't look like she has a microphone, just a camera.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Shoot. Okay.
not
We
good.
might, Susie, we might need you to type in your comments either in the Q&A or the chat, and we can have your comments addressed that way.
Or call in, maybe.
Yeah, we could have her call in as well. That's true.
Okay.
While we're working on that, let's have Kara.
You are.
Okay.
Hi, this is Kara's mom, Rita Snyder. I don't have internet at my house, so we're both on her computer.
Okay.
I've been part of the East Mullen Historic District for a long time, worked closely with the Morrises on a lot of issues in this area regarding infill. And I have to say, I kind of concur with with Lisa, that we have to be really careful where we're placing these infills, because they can actually cause the destruction of the historic area if owners see that they can put several parcels together and possibly get bigger projects. We've had some bigger projects go in our area that, you know, the neighbors really don't feel are compatible. So that's a huge concern for the historic neighborhoods that feel like they're totally being encroached upon when a developer decides they want to put something larger. And there's a lot of talk about preserving the neighborhood, but that gets pushed aside for development.
Thanks, Rita.
Thank you, guys.
I don't see any other hands raised on this one. Anyone else want to speak? Or Susie? Oh, here we go. Kiki.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Good. So I just have a couple thoughts. One is I think the intent and the result have a pretty big gap yet. You guys have done a great amount of work, and I do think that there is a need for this code, but I appreciate that you're very open-minded in the fact that there's still a lot more work to do. I also think that not utilizing the current expandability options, especially when it comes to these historic neighborhoods, is kind of missing. And you showed a lot of photos of these older houses, the ones on Sherman that have 5 units in it or something like that. Something in a historic neighborhood that could allow a property owner to, you know, increase the density without changing the footprint or the visual or the impact to the neighborhood, if they could provide parking, obviously. I think that has not been addressed in depth at all. I mean, it has, but not in depth.
Okay.
And I just don't. I also think that we're trying to address growth here with, you know, this is designed, I think you said, as for infill that is specifically, you know, vacant lots and or tearing down and redeveloping. But I think you're really going to have to be more specific with what that entails. The vacant lot issue, there aren't a lot of them. And I do think these historic neighborhoods and the charm of this community isn't addressed deeply enough. So I just wanted to say that. And I think that this was great public input. I'm kind of frustrated in that a lot of folks couldn't weigh in because of technical problems, but I know that you're on the right track of getting more positive public input, and I appreciate it.
Thanks, Kiki.
Okay, Woody. Okay, there we go.
Kind of thinking about those historical neighborhoods, I never really gave that much thought. Again, that's kind of the downtown that we all know and love. And obviously there's folks that are being protective of it. And I certainly respect that. It just dawned on me when Kiki was talking about that the past infill, when you showed those places up there by Costco and some of the other infill places we've done in the past off the old rules, those weren't mostly downtown. They were kind of out further north of the freeway. So I'm just wondering if us focusing on the downtown walkability thing is the right direction. I mean, there must be some reasoning behind it. I think I wrote you guys a question. I don't quite get why is it somewhat limited to this part of town, the downtown area, where there seems to be the most concerns about changing a neighborhood and stuff like that. Infill has its place, and as I recall, the ones that have been done in the past were more out there north and fulfilled a need and fulfilled the property that didn't really infringe on other people and other. So I'm just going to leave it there. But it just dawned on me that, you know, we're focusing downtown and maybe we should broaden it out a little. Thank you.
Good comment, Woody. I'd just like to respond to that a little bit because on the walkability part, we are looking beyond the downtown for this. There is walkable areas to the north of the highway that we've taken into consideration. We're also taking the walkability areas are around public transit areas. So anywhere where there's a public transit, that's a walkable area, and that's all north of the highway. So those all areas are walkable. They're close to commercial and employment centers. Those are all the walkable areas too. So the main focus today, a lot of people, the neighborhood compatibility part, a lot of the neighborhoods that are historic are closer to downtown. I think that's why the main focus of today's discussion, it was kind of brought down to this kind of the older part of the town. So, but the core housing is addressing all areas in the same way. Just wanted to put that out there. And thanks for those comments.
Okay, Ed.
So a couple of closing thoughts here. So as far as apartments go, there are, as everybody knows, all over the prairie and in Post Falls, there's apartment complexes going up all over the place. So I think it's reasonable to expect that we can keep some parts of the city from becoming, from being turned into apartment block after apartment block after apartment block. I don't think there's, maybe 10 years ago, you can make the case that there was a lack of apartments, a lack of, affordable rentals. I think given the past 5 to 10 years of construction of apartments all over the place, I just don't think that's a valid argument anymore. And if, it's not like these apartments are an hour's commute from downtown. They're a 10, 15-minute drive, maybe 20 minutes with traffic. So the notion that somehow there's this lack of apartments in the city and we have to find, every square inch of a historic district and turn that into apartments, it just doesn't make sense. There's hundreds and thousands of apartments within a 15 to 20 minute drive of downtown. And if you want to live in an apartment, those are the options. At the same time, there should be some areas like historic districts that maintain their character as single family homes with a couple of duplexes or triplexes here and there. But just destroying the character of these neighborhoods that have been here for 100+ years just to allow a few developers to make some money is absurd. And somebody brought up the concern of an entire block being bought out. And sure, that could happen. My concern is more half a block being bought out, and then the other half that isn't bought out is surrounded by apartments. Because if your block is bought out by a developer, well, you're not going to be there anymore. So I guess it doesn't really affect you. But what if half the block is bought out? One side of the block is bought out, and there's 40, 50 apartments there. And instead of your neighbors being 4 or 5 houses, they're now 50 apartments with God only knows how many parking spots. Or you go, the corner lots would qualify right now. Most corner lots are 8,250 square feet or more. So theoretically, every corner of every block could have an apartment building on it, and then everybody in between who's at 5,500 square feet has, again, 40, 50, who knows how many apartments as their neighbors. That's the concern. That's the Seattleification of Coeur d'Alene that I can pretty much guarantee if you ask 100 people that live there, 95 at least would say they don't want. That's why people move there, to get away from the Seattle, LA, San Francisco, Denver, you name it. We moved here to live in a not a small town, but a small city and within that small city, a neighborhood that is what it is, not a neighborhood that's going to turn into nonstop apartments. And there's plenty of land in Coeur d'Alene to build apartments. There's plenty of land to build townhouses, small houses, you name it. There's that unlimited acreage for that. There's no need to go and destroy existing neighborhoods just to fill in that extra square inch so a few developers can make a couple of extra dollars. And that's my piece for tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed.
Mike, we have one more. Mari raised her hand. I know we're
Okay.
getting shorter on time and we want to have time for the committee discussion. So I don't know if you want to let Mari just make a few quick comments before you jump into that. Okay.
Yeah.
Mari will let you speak. Okay.
Are you saying Marianne?
Oh, sorry. It just shows
I
up as
see.
M-A-R-I.
I see.
So
Okay, all right.
Oh, it's
Marianne.
Just to save time, you can just ditto everything that Ed just said.
Okay.
I couldn't have said it better. I'm
Okay.
vulnerable. I'm sitting downtown with a house across the street on a double lot that's about ready to fall down, and 2 doors down. So I'm feeling very vulnerable, and it kind of made me sick to my stomach when I found out what was being considered. Anyway, thank you, Ed. You said it.
All right, thanks, Mary. Okay, now we're going to move towards the committee discussion part of this presentation, and I will unshare my screen and the committee will have a chance to talk to.
Joe.
Okay.
Joe, do you want to unmute yourself and you can speak? It look like you're
Do you guys have the screen then?
muted. There we go.
Okay.
No, you're still muted, Joe. There you go.
Okay. Yeah, I thought you had muted me by putting me on this committee so that I couldn't talk during the public session. I kept raising my hand. Finally, Lynn came over and created the feedback, I think. But I think what people are concerned about, maybe first of all, mention the objectives of this process that was mentioned at the NIC forum was that two of them were to ensure established neighborhoods are not adversely affected, that there's compatibility with neighborhoods, that the units be house scaled in residential neighborhoods. And I think some of the concerns we're hearing is they don't feel that some of what could occur in their neighborhood is scaled to the houses that are around it. And recognizing that the committee, I really haven't attended a committee meeting until now, is that the committee has gone through looking at the infill housing types, the building heights, setbacks, lot sizes, parking, open space, housing unit sizes, lot sizes. And so there's recommendations now on all of those. And I think, that would have been interesting to show to the people, in the audience, because then they could see, because they may imagine they're too big. They may find out that it's not, or they might find that some areas maybe are allow a lot more height. And I think if you're using form-based zoning, it would be unique to each neighborhood, not just a cookie cutter for the entire area of around downtown Coeur d'Alene and where these will occur. And that, multi-units can be part of low-use residential properties. And so I think most folks who have houses in the area, like I do for the last 20 years, they're not against number of people being in a house. It's more, what that structure is like, have the same setback, same height. It may have 4 people in it versus my house has 2 people in it. And so I think that's not something that alarms them. And part of it was that in the presentation, you use the slides from, I think they were also used at the meeting at NIC. And that shows a lot of big buildings to start out with, and then they get bigger and bigger. And I think that's not what Coeur d'Alene would look like, even if we do a lot of infill housing. We really need, the correlating samples are good. So, but the slides themselves sometimes make people a little frightened. You know, one of my things that I've, tried to practice my entire life is to realize that most of today's problems are a result of yesterday's solutions. So you have to think through, what's going to occur if we do this, not now, but over 5-10 years from now. Will we drive out single family homes and that are not real high scale so that we can build bigger pieces of real estate on those homes, on that property? And so we need to think through what will be the consequences down the road of the incentives that we put in place. And then if we can think that through, then maybe we can make those incentives such that, bad things don't occur. But I often spent my life saying, well, if someone had thought about this, so then they would have realized that it was going to end up, in this situation. So, so glad to be in the committee, and hello to all my fellow committee members. It's tough not being part of the public, because then you have to, I like listening to them, and I kept agreeing with some of them, but it's hard to mute yourself for this long a period of time. So thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Is Josh next, or Walter?
Walter was raising his hand.
Okay. Then we'll go to Josh and then Greta.
Hi, everybody. I'm Walter Burns, and I'm like Joe. I'm new to the committee, but I want to point out that Joe and I were added as neighborhood representatives because there had been a lot of feedback that there wasn't enough neighborhood representation on the committee. So, we're here to help with that. I also live in the Garden District. I have the same concerns that everybody else does. I haven't been able to spend any time in the committee meetings because I'm new, but I have spent considerable amount of time talking to Mike and Hillary and going through what the core housing proposal really is about. There have been a lot of things discussed, a lot of different options to protect the older neighborhoods, and that's what I fight for. One thing is you limit what kinds of things you can put on there. Maybe it's only triplexes and fourplexes. None of the other stuff can be in a historic neighborhood.
Right.
Maybe, as has been suggested and discussed, you exempt some historic neighborhoods. That's just another part of looking at it. Another way to address it would be perhaps in historic neighborhoods or designated neighborhoods, you would have to have a special use permit, which would require it to go through the planning process and give public input into the planning and what the buildings are going to look like. The biggest thing I've heard in talking with these folks is that they do want to keep the scale the same. Another things we've discussed is perhaps, Ed, I think in particular, has been concerned that they're going to take up entire blocks. We can put limits on that. We can put different. We can exclude, say, putting 8 units on a block or 3 units or whatever. I mean, these are all things that are under discussion. So for my fellow friends in the historic neighborhoods, saying don't panic yet because we're working on it.
All right, Josh.
All right, I'll jump in. That's a good note for me to chime in on. I think you guys have done a great job of getting all the feedback, and this is all great conversation. I think one thing we want to point out is that this missing middle housing was never designed for the Garden District, and I think based on what we're hearing, it's pretty resounding that district doesn't want a product like this, and I think the design of this is to kind of skate to where the puck is going with your walkability corridor further out, other areas of infill that do have a need for the mixed use and the different density, the different products. But we want to make sure that we can compartmentalize, and if we have to exempt out a historic district, that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, because it may seem like there's unlimited acreage to build on in Coeur d'Alene, but I promise you there's not. So what we're doing here, we get a lot of conversation about stopping or controlling growth. And I could tell from the way everybody's talking here, everyone knows that you can't control growth. It's just growth is a product of living somewhere where everybody wants to live. And so what we try to do is address and manage it, and set these things in place for areas that are going to be developed down the road, that way they can be done responsibly. So that's my thought. And another thing that you do want to point out, if we said, the historic districts are going to be exempted out from something like this, there are legal non-conforming products in those neighborhoods already that have been there for years, that you don't want to necessarily penalize by doing a carve out. You want to, whether it's the special use permit that was just brought up or something, you want some kind of method for those to not be obsolete. So
thanks, Josh.
Thoughts.
Do we have time for one more?
I think so. Yeah, I think a few committee members. I know we were trying to end at 7, but it might be helpful just for a few other committee members to quickly.
Go on. Yeah.
Shauna or Greta, did one of you want to speak?
Yeah, I totally would love to participate. I want to say, first of all, I really appreciate all of the feedback and input from everyone in the community. It's kind of nice to hear where your thoughts are at and what your concerns are. I think some of the things that kind of kept getting reiterated were, the sea of apartments and blocks of apartments. And in reality, the real goal of the Infill project is to increase the variety of owner-occupied units. It's not just rental units. The goal is to have opportunities for single individuals, retirees to all own something that isn't necessarily a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. Everyone has different needs at different stages in life, and we're just trying to build upon our code to provide that opportunity to utilize lots in a better way. And then kind of the thing about the parking, 1.5 spaces per unit. I think in our discussion, it was kind of like, well, it used to be based on bedrooms, but that creates a sea of concrete when you try to accommodate, 3 2-bedroom units. That's just way too much concrete and land space that's actually required and is not actually feasible. Whereas we're making a minimum requirement of 1.5 lots. It's not the maximum requirement, as someone who's in the real estate industry, the better selling feature is to have at least 2 spots. Everyone's always wanting more parking. We're just trying to create a minimum. That's kind of.
Thanks, Greta.
Yeah.
Who was next?
I think Shauna wanted to speak.
Okay.
Hear me?
Yes.
Am I on? Okay. So goodness, I have to say, committee, we've done a good job here, I think, as far as everything we've put into this comment-wise to respond to those that are of concern. And Greta, exactly right on the parking. That is the minimum, and a lot of folks are really concerned about that, as they should be, especially as we live downtown. And I am a fellow downtowner as well. So in the historic districts, be it Garden and Fort Ground and Sanders Beach, there are several of us on the committee that are in these districts. And so I feel it's important for you to know that we are looking out for all of us that are in this historic district. I know Hillary and Mike can both attest to the fact that we are always looking out for what's going to be best for the best interest of these historic districts. And I think also we have to look at the fact that there are a lot of areas in these historic districts that do need improvement. A lot of houses that are falling down, and to bring something back that would fit into the neighborhood, and to take into consideration that we are really emphasizing design and building that goes on what fits the setbacks for that site and for that lot. Keep that into consideration, because there are a lot of houses in these areas that are literally falling down. And so to have something that is put back, that is fitting into the guidelines that we're trying to, as a committee, create as far as design and size, and those that aren't, that provide everything that is for parking and architectural design, is really what we are trying to preserve as a part of this committee. There are 3 or 4 of us on the committee that live in these historic districts. So just understand that we are doing our best also to look out for everyone's well-being. Having said that, it isn't all about the historic district. And we are all looking at all of the designs and what's going to fit into the neighborhood. And the committee is really involved in looking at everyone's best interest for that neighborhood. So that's why this neighborhood involvement tonight has been important. I think it's been great input by everyone. We on the committee will definitely take that into consideration. So that's basically it. I just want everybody to know that we are working hard to have everybody's back here.
Thanks, Shauna.
Mike, did you want to have Tom or Woody speak, or do you want to try and wrap up with the last few slides?
If they wanted to say something, we got time for one more, and then I could wrap it up. Did anybody, if they wanted to speak, if not, I could just.
This is Tom. I'm good with what was said by all the other committees, and I'm just going to wait and see, Mike and Hillary, what you come up with, what you heard tonight, and
okay,
we'll work on that. This is
all right, thanks, Tom.
Far from being over.
Yes, thank you. I'll go ahead and wrap it up then. I'd like to thank everybody for their input today. It was much appreciated. We really appreciate everybody's comments and ideas. So I just kind of reiterate where we've been. We started out in February of last year, and today we ended up with today's at the bottom with January's meeting. And where we're going is next, tentative schedule. We'll have a core housing committee workshop in March, a joint workshop in April, a planning commission meeting hearing in June, and a city council in July. So that's tentatively where we're at. And if you have any more comments, you can email me and go to our core housing website. We got a website set up with all our information on it. And I'll put this PowerPoint out there. It'll be a recorded document as well. We have the polling results. And you can actually reach me on the phone if you have any, if you want to call me as well. So, and that concludes our core housing meeting tonight. I appreciate everybody, and thanks again.